thank you for coming tonight. You know, I had the idea, we did a town hall a week and a half ago, and we looked at issues like mental health and relationships and all sorts of stuff from the lens of quarantine. And it was personal to me because I was exposed to someone with coronavirus early March. And so I've been in quarantine for a very long time and was thinking about a lot of these issues. And it was really special. And I love the idea of being able to talk about some of these things that we're dealing with a little bit more openly. And bring also some of my tech friends in and some of the people I know in the tech world who are inspiring and give other folks access to those people. So I'm, for folks who don't know me, I was our technology correspondent at CNN for 10 years, and I have a company called ... where we look at issues like mental health and love and unintended consequences through the lens of technology, and really try to talk about how we feel. And I think this moment is really important for that. And Jerry, who we can talk about how he's doing. I met Jerry years ago, and a story that to this day is probably one of my favorite stories I've done as a journalist. And it was on mental health and talking about depression in the tech community. And I remember at the time one of my old colleagues saying, no one's gonna click on a video about depression. And I was like, I don't know if you're right about that. And I called up a tech entrepreneur. I will not name him. He's a well-known tech entrepreneur. And I said, who's the person in tech that will talk to me openly about mental health? And he said, well, I don't know if he'll talk to you, but Jerry Colonna is the best CEO coach. And he's behind the most successful entrepreneurs. And he'll, if you can get him to, he'll talk, openly about a lot of these issues, because he talks to people, some of the most successful entrepreneurs behind the scenes about them. So before we kind of get to Jerry, a couple facts on him. He's the CEO coach he was a CEO coach to folks like the former CEO of Etsy. For all you podcast lovers, the folks who run Gimlet Media, they do Reply All. And he has a book out called Reboot: Leadership in the Art of Growing Up. And he's been a successful venture capitalist for part of his career. And he's just one of the best people I know, and is also known as the CEO Whisperer. So I thought that's a long intro, but I thought I wanted to give folks access and be able to ask him all sorts of questions tonight. So Jerry, over to you. I'm so happy you're here with us, and I love the idea of folks being able to ask you questions about this time. So how are you doing?
Well, maybe before I answer that question, I just want to say that one of the things, to go back to that original story, Lori, that you told about the way we met, I remember not being sure if I was going to take your call or actually talk to you about it, because at the time I was really frustrated with most media coverage of issues around depression and anxiety and the way that people were approaching it. And I remember asking you to promise me that you weren't going to do a quick hit job. 5 tips to make your life easier if you're depressed. And you promised me, and you came through. And you did a meaningful story. And I began to trust you from that moment. And so I continue to trust you. And when you said, we're going to do this thing, then my impulse is always, if Lori asks, then I say yes. And then I figure out what I've gotten myself into after that. So it's that. Your integrity comes through in your work, and your care and concern for people. And I think that that's really important, especially at these times. So how am I? At Reboot, we typically do a check-in in a red, yellow, green kind of way, with a ode to polyvagal theory for the folks who are interested in searching in that stuff. And I would say that I'm a yellow. I'm mostly green these days. My heart is heavy. I was born in Brooklyn, and I see Carl there, Carl to Brooklyn. And it's painful what's going on across the world, globally. And then there are these pockets of humanity that are really painful. So there's that. But generally, I'm okay. And good news is that all those that I love and are close to are safe, and that's important. And I am just doing my darndest to make myself available to people so that I can be of service. So that's how I am.
Appreciate that. And, you know, look, like to give a really honest answer about to answer the question, I wanted to make sure I got to the intro for you because like, I want people on this call to know how special you are and how trusted you are with folks in tech and the tech community. But I also want to give like a really honest answer just because, you know, I think we're beginning to look at social media and everyone living out their best quarantine lives. You know, I think some days for me, right, I would say today I'm a yellow too. Jerry has this thing he does. It's you know, like you red, yellow, or green. I would say today I'm a yellow too. And I've, you know, and I think some days are better than others during this. And I think the most important thing we can do is try to find community and not isolate ourselves. So, you know, guys, you know, because Jerry has coached folks for a good part of his career, and he's just one of the best. If you have questions for him, definitely ping Jack or put him in the chat, and I'll make sure to come to you. Because full disclosure, he's made me cry before. He helped me during one of the biggest career transitions when I left CNN. You know, and journalism, we have to do a full disclosure. He helped me through one of the hardest and scariest decisions I made. And so I can vouch for him. Let's put it that way, and a lot of people can. So definitely, you know, put your questions there. I want to start off before we get to folks asking questions. I wanted to start off with a survey, and you guys can raise your hands just to kind of read the Zoom room a little bit, and you can keep them up too. Raise your hand if you've lost your job. Okay, raise your hand if you've had friends.
Keep your hands up. Yeah, keep your hands up.
Raise your hand if you've had friends who've lost their jobs in this environment. Raise your hand raise your hand if you've had family members lose their job. Raise your hand if you're worried about losing your job. Raise your hand if you're worried about your business. Raise your hand if you're dealing with issues like anxiety and fear. Right. So just kind of a quick exercise to show, I think a lot, you know, this is a really painful environment. And there's a lot of rawness there. And a lot of us have a lot of these types of concerns. So, you know, and you're not alone in them. So, you know, I want to get.
Can I pause on that, Lori?
Yeah, please.
That's a really important moment that just happened. And I know there's 65 participants, 34 who are non-video. And I'm imagining that some percentage of the non-video also raise their hands. And I've been doing a lot of these kinds of talks lately. And one of the things that I think is really important to recognize and understand is that intellectually, we understand that, what was it, by last week, 10 million people had lost their jobs. And by this week, who knows what the numbers are going to be, 15. Intellectually, we know we're not alone. But emotionally, it's hard not to feel that isolated or that it's just happening to us. And one of the most profound acts of self-care is to establish the community by understanding the shared experience. It is the basis of empathy, and it is the basis of compassion. And you're going to get sick and tired of me saying this by the end of this time together. But what's going to get us through isn't just intellectual problem solving. We need a lot of problem solved, but love and compassion. And slowing down and pausing and recognizing really important things. Like, by the time Laurie was done with all those questions, every hand on my screen was up. Except for one, and I'll call on you later. Just kidding.
You don't want to get Jared, trust me.
That's right. The high beams turn on, and then you're in trouble. And that's a really important thing to recognize, because we're not going through this alone, even though it feels dreadfully alone. So I'm going to do that too. I'm going to periodically slow the pacing down. That's a good time to fall asleep if you are tired. Just kidding. It's a thing I do so that what we're experiencing has an opportunity to actually land within our bodies. Because in my experience, we tend to approach big issues. Carl has heard me say this at a boot camp. Henry has heard me say this at a boot camp, like speed bumps. And we tend to speed up at the speed bump. And that's how you bottom out. So I'm going to slow us down and go, ooh, that's a big one, as we go through this.
Someone asked a question, Jerry, during that, and then I want to call up some folks to just start asking you questions. But someone asked a question that I kind of relate to during this. That was, how much of our fears should we share with our companies? This is quite awkward because my employees are on this Zoom. Oh no, did we lose Jerry? Where is he? Oh, there he is. Okay.
Laurie, do you want me to let him ask Tim ask the question himself?
Yeah, sure. And I'll just set this up by saying, like, I totally relate to this in a way, in that I think it's hard. How much do you share about your anxiety and your fear when you're leading a company? You know, and so yeah, let's bring Tim up to ask it.
Great, Tim.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so my question, I'm a founder of a small company with 45 people. And one of the things I'm trying to navigate is, I know the importance of vulnerability and sharing, but I'm also conscious that, that I don't want to overburden people too much with what's going on with me. And so that line of how much of our fears should we share with the people working for us and with our companies is something I'm interested to hear your thoughts on.
Thanks, Tim. And what country are you calling from? Are you in the States?
I'm in Sydney, Australia.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So you're going to see me looking down occasionally, and I'm going to make notes to myself. They're incomprehensible, so don't worry. Only the CIA can read them. So there's two paths that I can go in responding to this question. And the first path, though, is going to be very specific to you, Tim. So we're going to hang out a little bit. And the first thing was that the first phrase I wrote down is something to the effect of, I don't want to share my burden. I don't want to be a burden. Did I hear that right?
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the idea is that you're trying to support people and reduce their stress. And so I think it's helpful to be vulnerable to a point that lets them feel comfortable that they can share. But if I'm using them as my crutch, I think that that's a dangerous path to go down.
So there are three words that are linked in your question: burden, crutch, dangerous. Quick show of hands to those whose video is turned on. Anybody else relate to Tim's question that if I am a leader, and I share what's going on, I'm going to be a burden. I might use them as a crutch, and it's therefore dangerous. I've been doing a lot of public talks, not just recently, not just since my book came out last June. You can all buy 10 copies. They make a great paperweight. No, just kidding. I've been doing some form of this talk. Henry, when did we first meet? Years and years and years and years ago. And in every single talk, someone raises their hand and asks some version of this question. And it's even more pronounced right now. And behind the question is a belief system around what does it mean to be a leader? Or what does it mean to be a romantic partner? Or what does it mean to be a parent? Or what does it mean to be a son or a daughter or a child, however you identify? And the belief system is that I'm somehow supposed to magically not have my feelings. Because if I actually have my feelings and share my feelings, I'm going to be a dangerous burden and turn the people I love and care about into a crutch. It's a very complex structure. And what I would say is many people believe this because they have grown up with a belief system, either specifically told to them or because it was demonstrated, because they had somebody who could not bear to take care of their own feelings, project their feelings into everybody else around. Okay. When we're talking about a leader, though, when we're talking about, especially in these times, people do not follow us, despite what we tell ourselves. People do not follow us because we have all the right answers. I'm going to say that one more time because it's incredibly important. People do not follow leaders because they have the right answers. A leader's job is to help people find their own path and their own answers. And when I take that posture, that is, I don't even like to use the word authentic anymore because it's so overused, it is meaningless. When I show up without bullshit, without pretending, and without faking, I instill trust. And what people need more than anything right now is safety. And the corollary to that is trust. And so, we've got a conundrum. Tim, you're freaked out. And if I'm real and I'm freaked out, aren't I going to freak everybody else out? Does that land for you?
Yeah.
So what I'm suggesting is not license for you to project your freaked out state onto your partner, your children, your parents, your siblings, your colleagues. We're still responsible for maintaining our own self-soothing. But it kind of goes like this. Tim, how many employees do you have?
45.
45. Imagine yourself standing up in front of the 45 employees and saying, these are scary times. I don't know what the next 2 or 3 months will bring. I don't know if we're going to make it. But I do know what I still believe in. Tell me what your company does.
We're employer of record service, so we employ people internationally.
Why is that important to you?
Because I think that people working in different countries and ability of people to work with people from different countries and cultures is really powerful.
Do you have any experience with that in a personal basis?
Yeah, I've worked internationally my whole life. I've worked in a few different countries.
And how
really
important was it
benefited
for, how important was it for you in that moment to be able to find a way to work in a way when you were, say, an expatriate somewhere?
Hey Jerry, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We are getting some pretty bad feedback that everyone's hearing, and I think it might be coming from your end, as I've tried muting everyone else. So I'm not sure if there's anything you're able to adjust on your end.
What's the feedback sound like?
It sounds
Could be
like
my
a.
sonship.
It sounds
Like a
like my
Russian-
head in quarantine on day 13, I would say.
It's
like a
probably-
whizzing kind of whistling noise.
Probably my son taking a shower.
But Tim, you're not off the hook because we're coming back to you.
We're coming back. Hold on. Yeah. I think this might be it. Hold on.
Sorry about that, Jerry.
But I'm happy to answer any questions in the meantime. Probably not about saving your business though, but maybe tech and humanity.
But well, Lori, as my boss, how do you feel about how much you or I or anyone else should share their thoughts on quarantine and their fears with the people they work with?
I actually think it's important for us to be able to be. Tim, I struggle with this, with what you're struggling with. I think it's it's important to be honest about some of these things. I struggle with like how honest I should be on certain days, but I want to be able to create an open environment for people to talk about.
So what was that request about
It's
what
back.
life
It's
is-
back, Jerry.
Yeah, I know it. It's going to be back. What was that request about life in quarantine? So I have a house guest who did not know, and they're turning the shower off. How's that?
We had a
Okay.
guess that it was a tea kettle.
Yeah, no,
And you
no,
just
it's
took
the
me-
shower.
you took
And
me
it's a
off the hook.
really good microphone. So I apologize to everybody. So,
It's good. Well, I don't think Tim is completely off the hook, right?
All right.
So Tim, if you guys want to get back to it, and then we can.
yeah.
Get some
So
other
Tim, I'll get back to it and I'll bring it to a close. Here's the thing in this moment, and I think that this is critically important to remember, which is why I wanted to spend a little time with it. The most important thing to share is not that you know what the answers are going to be and what the future is going to be. And it's not even that you're unafraid. The most important thing to share is what it is that you still believe to be true. Do you still believe that the work you set out to do is important? That's what you hold on to. Do you still believe in the people that you hired? Even if you have to let them go, you hold on to that. Because what gets lost in times like this, in the midst of all of the fear, is the why of what we were doing in the first place. And aside from small business opportunities that may or may not have shifted, or new opportunities that have created, generally speaking, the things that motivate us remained. I can just tell you that that's what motivates me. I don't know what the financial future of my small little company is, but I believe in my team. And I believe down to the bottom of my toes in the importance of the work that I'm doing, as evidenced by this. And that remains. And we need to hold on to the things that can anchor us when we get so groundless.
Yeah.
Is that helpful, Tim?
Yeah, very helpful. I love the word you used, anchor, because it is part of the problem. You feel very dislocated, and so having things that you can come back to, which bond you as a group, but also that remind you of your purpose, I think are really, really helpful. Thank you.
You know, I won't go through the process of reading the full Pema Chodron quote, but I've been reading a quote lately from her book, Comfortable with Uncertainty. which I highly recommend. And in it, she brings the analogy to the fact, she brings forward the notion that we, that like the weather, we're constantly shifting in our experiences, positive and negative. That like the moon, we wax and wane. And what she says is that our task is to sit like a mountain in the midst of a hurricane. To sit calmly, like a mountain in a hurricane. The problem is that that's really freaking hard. It's really, really hard. And over the last few weeks, as the more I've read that quote, the more difficult that has struck me. The difficulty has really struck me. And so what I've come to understand is that the mountain is purpose. It's not posture. It's not the rigidity of a strong leader who pretends to have it all figured out. It's, why did I launch this business in the first place? Or why did I marry that person? Or what is my role in life? These things don't change. And that's the ground. That's the anchor.
It's interesting, Jerry, right as you were saying, like, it's actually hard to be a mountain in a hurricane. It's like I'm in New York City. I don't know where everybody is. But you know, it's scary all over, and it's pretty scary here right now. And as you're saying that, I hear sirens outside because it's really silent. And then just to give you guys like a little taste, it's like, it's silent except for, depending on where you are, every 10 minutes, every 2 hours, sirens. You know, so I love this idea of being like a mountain in a hurricane. And then it's also, you know, knowing that that's harder sometimes than others, but I think, you know, knowing that purpose, that's really helpful. I want to call in for our next the next person who wanted to chat with you, a woman named Rose. I think she's here. She produces a podcast called The Women, and so I'm all for this. So Rose, thanks for coming, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, y'all. This is like my 4th Zoom, so I have like, I'm so excited about it. Like group Zoom, yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're here for human connection.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Jerry. I feel like I know you listening to so much of you on Gimlet, so you know, I appreciate you being here, and thanks for having me, Lori and Jack and Sabine. So I'm in this situation where I can still work. I can work remotely. Like, all of my like Maslow's needs are met in this situation. And I have like, there's a real opportunity here to kind of go above and beyond and do more than just my weekly interview show, which I've been able to easily pivot and do some really meaningful and purposeful interviews that have given me a lot of, it's really grounded me during these last few weeks to speak to some really amazing women on the front lines, whether nurse, therapist, reporters, epidemiologists, biosecurity experts. But I have a choice if, you know, especially looking at the next month or 2 months. I only have like 2 months left of my season. It's a weekly show. And during that time, I can really use it as a launching pad to do like another side show or something else with all of these interviews that are being left on the cutting room floor. I have this inverse option of, I could do way more work and, like, you know, it could be really good for my career or my season or for the moment. But kind of at the Dutch, I'm much happier when I'm working only like 35 hours a week and giving myself the space to, you know, just be in Brooklyn and like mentally kind of relax. I don't really know what the right choice is.
let me see if I understand what you see as the choice. The choice is between continuing the work that you've been doing for the last few weeks, which is sort of the women on the front lines, and sort of leaning into that and doing that more, or to sort of ease off the gas pedal a little bit.
Yeah.
And take care of yourself a little bit.
The status quo, no problem. I can keep the weekly show, but I feel like I'm missing out on this opportunity to either make more money or extend the season, or to really get the attention of like the higher ups at the organization, to do more with the show, to do maybe a side show or a daily digest of women, or to kind of just maintain a nice balance.
I'm going to reflect back what I'm hearing, and I could be mishearing, so correct me if I'm not hearing this right. But it feels like the opportunity, and this is a crude way to express it, but the opportunity is to either make more money or gain more status, or to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, yes, this is the problem with like sharing your real feelings.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No. Don't. When we start the process of looking inward, one of the impulses is to start to then self-criticize. These are scary financial times. And the impulse behind wanting to make more money or secure status may be an impulse for safety. I'm not, I think Sharon Salzberg may be on our call, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I think this could be ego, but we'll leave that aside for a moment. Okay. There's fear here. I mean, does that connect back to the reason why you would want to make more money?
Definitely. It's the uncertainty of the future. Yeah.
You said something about the future. Tell me again what you said.
Oh, just the uncertainty. I think that, like everyone raising their hand earlier, not really knowing how this year will be. Yeah. Next year.
So part of the impulse is to just sort of store up enough so that you're okay.
Right.
And when I start to tease it out, what occurs to you is the right thing to do? I use that term loosely because I'm not so sure that there's just a singular right path.
I want to be one of those people that has this kind of heavy keel of a boat, that has this grounded confidence, not in the, economy, but in oneself. Like, my aspiration when I think about myself in the future is, I'm going to get to the point where I feel really secure in my abilities, and for things to kind of just work out and, take things at a calmer pace. But that really kind of goes against this little squirrely fear of the moment, and not knowing, is this like, quote unquote, my shot? Although you can say that all the time, but is this like a good time for like me personally to, the money and the status and the, doing more work? Because I immediately think to myself, like, if it doesn't pay off, then it really wouldn't be worth like the stress of the next 2 months,
Mm-hmm. So I think this time, this pandemic time, is forcing us to confront a couple of very, very important things. One is the visceral reality of impermanence. You said before that, the squirrely, and I love that image of a squirrel packing away nuts right? That's what popped into my mind. Not squirrely as in, nutty. The notion of packing away enough nuts as a guard against the uncertainty of the future. One of the things that I've come to see more clearly is that certainty about the future is an illusion. It's a really useful illusion, but it's an illusion, right? As I often say, we come to a curb, we look at the walk sign, the walk, don't walk sign, and we say to ourselves, when the light turns green, it's safe to cross the street. But the truth is, we don't know that for sure, right? Statistically, yeah, it's okay. But we don't know for sure. And the thing about a time like this is it shakes our confidence in our ability to know the future for certain. And with that lack of confidence, we have to confront the fact that all of our plans may be for naught. And that sucks. That's really hard. On the other side, where did you go? There you go. You moved. On the other side, there's this desire to somehow make sure that we're living in the moment, that we're not wasting our lives. Because it's another thing that has become visceral and true, which is the preciousness of what one of my friends call his minutes. How am I spending my minutes? My colleague, Ray. And so we're sort of caught between these two states. And I can't tell you whether or not you should go forward with this. I can tell you that the choices that I have made in my life that stem from fear have tended to keep me small. And the choices that I have made that stem from connection to what I would say is larger self, to integrity, to purpose and meaning, have made me larger and has enabled me to breathe. I often make choices out of fear. But I know that the choices that are life-affirming and life-giving for me are the choices that make me feel large. So, in a way, you could choose to continue on the path you are, and it might mean more money, and it might mean more status, but it might be that you living more largely still. Or you can choose to alter that path, take a break, and not choose to do that out of fear. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And I think the litmus test is not money or in the moment self-happiness. It's what brings me alive. What is my purpose? Because if anything feels really true in this moment, it's that we are called to live out our vocation, vocare, the calling. What is our work to do? If not now, when? Because I don't know what next year is going to be. So I'm going to live it now. Is that helpful?
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question for someone who didn't want to ask you, Jerry, and I know they've been through it over the last couple of weeks, but I was doing a Q&A thing on Instagram and saying, how are you feeling? And someone responded and said, I'm feeling hopeless. I was let go, and they were let go over the phone. Obviously people can't be let go in person right now and this and that. And so the way I think the way that it happened felt pretty terrible. And this is a person who had a job I think for something like 5 years at a place. So obviously it was something they loved. And so now they're sitting, and I think I say this person's story because I think it represents maybe a lot of people's stories. So this person is, now sitting there and self-isolation during this pandemic, and they've just lost their job and they're feeling hopeless. What do you say to that person?
Well, two things occur to me. One is to just recognize and acknowledge the probably driven by fear, poor judgment displayed by the person who had to do the layoffs. And I want to be compassionate to that person as well, because many folks that I work with are laying off people. And out of the pain and suffering of doing that, oftentimes they will shut themselves off to the very human connection that is possible in those moments, because along with that human connection becomes a sense of shame and fear. And I want to acknowledge that for the person who wrote to you, it's incredibly painful to be terminated in uncertain times. It's hard to be fired in any time, but especially right now, and especially when there's this isolation going on. And then I imagine it came over email. I'm hoping it was not intentionally cruel, but as a consequence of the circumstances that we're in. To the person who's feeling hopeless, I would just simply say that we hear you. And it is, I tend not to be a big fan of simple pearls of wisdom. One door closes, another door opens. They don't seem particularly fitting or helpful in these times. But I would say that, like, as I was saying before to Tim, that in times of distress like this, what I like to turn to and what I advise to turn to are the things that are those anchors. And to remember that there are things out there that produce joy and love and care and concern. Lori, you were talking before about those sirens. And what I imagined when you mentioned those sirens was the bravery of the people driving those fire trucks, ambulances, police cars, whatever it was. And what I imagined was their willingness to face their fears. And that gave me hope. There are all sorts of handy guides to networking and finding a new job and all that stuff. And all that seems irrelevant in times like this, doesn't it? And what I would say is that there's an opportunity to go back to that first exercise that we did and imagine all the people who are feeling that way. And to see hopelessness as a state that all humans are capable of feeling. And to wish for us to be human together in that space. I wish that your questioner were here, because I would love to be able to see their face and let them know that I care.
Well, Well, I'm sure it means a lot. I will relay the message in some, I will not do it as eloquently as you, I'm sure, but I will find a way. I think that the next person we want to bring in is Caleb. And Caleb runs a cleaning and organizing business in New York, which I can imagine has taken a hit. So Caleb.
Yeah, it's completely, we've shut everything down just for everyone's safety. It was a hard thing to do because we want to try. I have a very small business. This is like maybe 5 of us working with maybe 30 to 40 clients a month, and everyone is a strong relationship with each one. I know each one very personally on an intimate level because we go into their homes, we declutter, we organize their life, and then we clean it on a maintaining basis. And we go so much further into their lives than just that. We really keep their whole life in order and keep their mind space clear as well. So it was
available.
Yes, well, here we are. It was really hard to that mind being responsible and saying, I know we're clean people, but I don't feel comfortable accidentally bringing the virus into your home. And so that was a hard decision to make. But right now we're feeling very positive because people are going to want our help when we're allowed to come back. It's just being the most prepared, I guess. And so every day we're brainstorming of, what is the CDC saying on cleaning? And maybe we'll take our temperature and show that before we enter an apartment, but we don't know who a carrier is. So it's hard to be brainstorming 24/7 and also just taking the time to be like, take a breath, relax, go for a walk. But as a small business owner, you're thinking 24/7 about your business. How do you keep the balance?
You keep the balance between, or how do you sort of dial down the thinking about your business 24/7?
Yeah.
Well, this is true for all times, right? I mean, for all
Yeah.
small business and for entrepreneurs in particular. It's not exclusively entrepreneurs, but predominantly. And especially true now. And the irony is that the business is shut down and it's still in your head. Yeah. I can only offer the kinds of things that I try to do myself, right? Which is, and it's hard that I find myself more engaged and working harder than I have ever worked in my life, because I am of service in these times. I think that the things that work for me are things that I do have a little bit of methodologies that I try to do that have always sustained me, that are even more precious now. My meditation practices, I was speaking with my teacher Sharon yesterday, and I said it feels more than ever like a pillar. And for some reason, when I'm sitting on the cushion now after 17 years, I, for the most part, don't wander into thinking about work. I have found myself in quarantine life. I'm privileged and fortunate enough to have an exercise bike. And so I'm on the bike every day. I have found myself, this afternoon, I had the great, gorgeous gift of being able to, I did a call with Jack and Lori sitting outside in the sun. Right? And each one of those things becomes really precious. And the more I can feed those parts of me, it really, more than ever before, it feels like I'm taking in molecules of protein, like that my body just desperately needs sunshine, or desperately needs a view, or desperately needs, I played a game of Scrabble with my son and his girlfriend a couple of weeks ago. Just brief periods of rest from the relentlessness. And I am really committed to reading books that have nothing whatsoever to do with my work. And I still find things that connect back to work. I just finished Valley Forge, which is a great story about George Washington and all of that stuff. These are the things that I do to support me. A phone call or care. But these are extraordinary times, and our mind is going to go back, and be gentle with yourself when you find yourself back. And you know, it reminds me of the meditation instruction that when you lose the focus on your breath, you just, Sharon would say, begin again, and you come back to your breath. And in this case, rather than coming back to work, you come back, you're wearing a Fleetwood Mac shirt, you come back to music. There you go. You know, you come back to the things that sustain. Art sustains, nature sustains, human hearts sustain. That's the nutrition.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck with your
I
business.
think we have.
Thank you.
I think we have a question from Cecilia. Cecilia, are you here?
Hey, Jerry.
Yo,
Hey,
how you
Cecilia.
doing?
Hi, Jerry. Hi, Lori.
Hey,
Hi.
so good to see
Hi.
you.
Great to see you too.
Yeah.
I'm in New York, like Lori is. I'm in Brooklyn. I sent my son to Florida on the 21st, right before lockdown, because I was exhibiting or feeling some symptoms. So I haven't seen him since. But my question is, I'm currently advising entrepreneurs, and I'm uncertain how I could help them, even though I've been through the last 2 recessions. Every day seems to be a new normal. And I'm uncertain if what I'm saying to them could actually be helpful or more damaging, because it's you know, as everybody says, it's what we're going through is unprecedented. So yeah, so I'm hesitant. And also I find myself flaking sometimes, where I have set conference calls and Zoom calls. And some days, based on the news I've read or a friend that I've learned that just got sick, I'm not up to talking to anyone, you know? Then I rest up and do some self-care, then I have the strength, and then I can be part of the world again. So I guess I'm part of the people too who's adjusting to the new normal, and each day is different. So what can I do to be positive, to be truthful, to be optimistic? I mean, what of the above?
Tell me your son's name.
Mateo.
Mateo, that's right. I should know that. I remember all the pictures of him on Facebook. I want to recognize that it's hard for you right now. You know, as a parent, to not be able to physically lay eyes on your child in times like this is incredibly painful. And to send them away to stay safe is an incredibly difficult choice. And it would feel inhuman to just dive into a how question without first recognizing that. And then to further recognize your own, dare I say, fear and your own experience. And part of what occurs to me is to implore you to be gentle with yourself. I hear you asking of yourself something that's really, really difficult, almost impossible. To have the answers, to be positive, and to give advice that always works. Cecilia, that's a standard that I don't know anybody can match. When those of us who are fortunate enough to sit with a great teacher like, say, His Holiness Dalai Lama, it's his presence. It's how he holds himself that matters. The gift that we can give each of us, each other, is the ability to listen deeply, is to hear, even without necessarily having the right thing to say. As I hold myself right now, all I want you to know is that I can feel some of the things that you're feeling. I can't fix anything. I can't make it better. And trust me, I'm from Brooklyn. I want to punch COVID right in the freaking face. But we can't. And so we sit with each other at a socially distant place. And so as I am trying to do with you, so may you do with those with whom you work. I know the impulse, for those of you who are coaches or are trying to coach people, I know the impulse is clients are in that state of like, what do I do? What do I do? And if you try to give anything but small suggestions, you're going to fall short. Because every situation is different. You listen with an open heart. You hear their feelings. You feel them. You know, of all the things that change as a result of this, may this also change. May we actually listen to one another. Maybe now, you know, Lori and I were kind of doing the whole, how are you? The famous Jerry, how are you? No, really, how are you? You know, the essence behind that whole shtick, which is now what it is, didn't start off as a shtick. The essence behind it is to actually slow down long enough to care how the other person is feeling. And to be with that person in this moment. What I have found is that it gives me sustenance. I have more energy at the end of this call than I had at the beginning of this call. Compassion flows both ways. Empathy flows both ways. From that place, we'll figure out the answers. We'll make Bill Gates the pandemic king, give him all the power, say fix everything, because he's the only one I know who's figured it all out. Right?
Yeah.
Or being realistic.
Or being realistic, right?
Like I just got off a call with my son's a senior at Xavier, and the headmaster president of the school is saying we might be back May 11th. We might be back for graduation, you know, and I know we're not, you know, but I don't, so also with the messages being conflicted from our, you know, the head of our country to what Bill Gates is saying, to what my very smart friends who are saying, that we have to wait for, you know, the antidote, or, you know, the virus, so that we can actually be able to be free and roam the streets. So everybody has a different timeline. And I have a good relationship with my son, because from day one, I vowed not to lie to him. I never even let him believe in Santa Claus, because I didn't want to break his heart and say he didn't exist. So as he said, so I heard that we're going to be, going back to school May 11th. And I said, don't, he might have said that, but I don't think it's really going to happen. So just, I had to put a damper on his good mood that he got a text or FaceTime from one of his classmates that was the case. But so my approach, I guess, has been that way too with the entrepreneurs I advise. I try to be truthful and listen, but also giving myself a large margin of error that what I'm saying, because it's only gained from information I'm getting from other parties, may or may not be correct.
The last thing I would say about this is that I think that our view is very short right now, and all we have is the next few days in front of us. All we have is the next few weeks at most in front of us. And I don't know that anybody can really say with certainty what May 11th is going to be in New York. And for those who are not in New York, Xavier is a high school in New York. It's a good school, Jesuit school. And that's part of that impermanence, is that we don't know. And maybe that's the lesson you can teach Matteo, is not so much that he can't believe and hope, but that how much can his view, can he look forward to? And help him remember what is good about his life right now. He's in Florida. Is he safe? Yeah. So may he stay safe. And tell him to wear a mask. Yeah.
And I'll just add, Cecilia, you're one of the, you're just an incredible entrepreneur in your own right. I remember years ago when we asked women to speak openly about bad behavior in the venture capitalist community, you did it when other people didn't, and it opened the door for a lot of other people to do. So I think I remember your courage years ago, and I still get messages about it, and people, so I would just say, you've got great instincts. I think, having dealt with you in a different way, and I always admired your courage during that. So. We have to wrap in a little bit, so I'll say a couple things. We'll take a couple quick questions, and then something, we talk about humanity, something back in the days when I could host events at my home and parties, something I always found pleasure in is I just have friends from all walks of life, people who are, artists, chefs, magicians, and I invited one of those folks to do something surprising at the end of this, because I know that these are some heavy times. And I since you guys are kind of in my living room in a way, although it looks a little dark and weird in the background, I thought we would end it with a little bit of a surprise, but we're not going to end yet. I want to be able to, I want one or two more people to ask some quick questions, and then we're going to get to the ending.
Yes, some quick questions, and then if I may, I wanted to read something.
And Jerry wanted to read something. So maybe we'll do one more question, and then Jerry, if you want to close with reading, and then we'll do what I now am kind of being like a hype man for. I don't surprise we have at the ending. I know. I just don't want you guys to leave, because it's a really cool thing. I mean, it's going to be interesting. So is Jerry's poem. So let's, Jack, I think you had one.
Yeah. So I got a message from someone named Kevin. I think he's in here, but he's not on video right now. But he's asking, so he works at a small financial firm, and he's struggling with sort of the psychological effects of no longer having a physical barrier between work and home life. But he's also seeing this as an opportunity, and members of his team are struggling too to kind of be able to turn things off, because their work and home are now the same place. But he's also seeing an opportunity to realize that this is in some ways working, and that and everyone who works for the business right now is local, but that it could be good for business to open it up to people that work all over the country or all over the world. And he's wondering how to weigh those two somewhat conflicting feelings of not necessarily liking the concept of working from home and having work and life be all one mishmash, but at the same time seeing it as a potential benefit for the company to do that even more after this is all over.
Yeah, a lot of people are struggling with the blending of work and life, and I think there's a pragmatic and practical suggestion that I have around that, and then there's just sort of the recognition. The first is the recognition that some of us are increasing our work hours as a way to deal with the anxiety that we're feeling. There's a lot more. There's a lot of turning to the work in order to distract from the difficult feelings. And what I would suggest is that there may be better ways and healthier ways to work with those feelings, some of which we've already talked about here. But the notion of, it would be nice, Lori, Jack, for example, if you all had a follow-up with some of these folks and that maybe they could connect with one another. Reboot has put out just this week a whole bunch of material around people's self-organizing peer groups and peer support groups, which to me are much better than virtual happy hours, which feel really forced. But to self-organize ways to create virtual peer groups. And what we've done is combined all of our learnings in 4 years, 5 years of running virtual groups. And that's all out there and it's available for free. We even have a podcast around that. The second thing I would say is because we lose the ritual of the daily commute, I find it really helpful. I've been working from home primarily for almost 20 years. I find it really, really important to have little rituals. Like I get up and I shave every day and I shower and I get dressed. And sometimes I shower 2 times. And I do the things that sort of send a signal to my brain, I'm working and I'm not working. And a lot of times I violate those rules, but I generally try not to work after 7 or 8 o'clock at night. I try to keep things contained in a way. And if you're so lucky as to have a confined, defined workspace, it's really important to not do other things. Like I don't use this computer to watch a Netflix show or something like that. It just mixes things. So very pragmatic. With that, Lori, I would like to read one poem. Reboot's famous for our poems. I find poetry is a form of art that sustains. And this poem has been in my mind a lot lately. I usually read it for people in times of transition, in times of change for their life, maybe even dare I say midlife for some folks. But it feels really appropriate right now. And this poem is called Old Maps No Longer Work by Joyce Rupp. Old maps no longer work. I keep pulling it out, the old map of my inner path. I squint closely at it, trying to see some hidden road that maybe I've missed. But there's nothing there now, except some well-traveled paths. They have seen my footsteps often, held my laughter, caught my tears. I keep going over the old map, but now the roads lead nowhere. A meaningless wilderness where life is dull and futile. Toss away the old map, she says. You must be kidding, I reply. She looks at me with Sarah eyes and repeats, toss it away. It's of no use where you're going. No map, no specific directions, no this way ahead or take a left. How will I know where to go? How will I find my way? No map. But then my midlife soul whispers, there was a time before maps when pilgrims traveled by the stars. There was a time before maps when pilgrims traveled by the stars. It is time for the pilgrim in me to travel in the dark, to learn to read the stars that shine in my soul. I will walk deeper into the dark night, dark of my night. I will wait for the stars, trust their guidance, and let their light be enough for me. Old maps no longer work. This is a time where it feels like the old maps just do not work. The stars
Great.
remain. Go ahead,
Jerry,
Laurie.
that was beautiful, and I'll say Jack posted it in the chat for folks who want to listen to it. I love that. I remember when I was thinking about leaving my job at CNN. This was after 10 years. I remember going to a retreat where Jerry was, and that poem being there. So that brought back all sorts of memories. You know, I want us to get to this magic trick. We have one more person, Jerry, who wanted to ask you something, who's been waiting too. So if we could just do it really quick, and then
Sure.
we'll do one more, so we can end on another human note, and then we'll do a magic trick, and then hopefully people can forget for a second we're all in quarantine in some capacity. So Gert, and Gert is in New York and makes sustainable clothing hangers, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Gert, are you here?
I'm here, sorry.
Oh, Gert sounds like a robot at the current moment. Hold on one sec.
Gert, yeah, we're having a little trouble with your mic. Yeah, try it without the AirPods. We've had some issues with AirPods with people.
Oh.
Are you able to just switch over to your computer microphone instead of the AirPods?
Yeah, do you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Good.
Yeah,
You guys,
great.
it sounds like we came full circle. We started with technical difficulties, and we're going to end with technical difficulties.
This was all planned. I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking my question. Well, first off, I wanted to say something because Jerry just mentioned we sit with each other in a socially distant place, yet, and I'm finishing that one, yet so close together, I feel. It's pretty amazing how we can get so close together in such a session. So that's the positive, I guess, of these type of circumstances. But indeed, thank you for taking my question. We do sustainable clothing hangers. We work in different places in the world. I run the commercial department of our company. We're a company that has been around only for a couple of years. We're still building the company. But obviously we're supplying, we're a business to business organization. We're supplying to retail and hospitality. So the current circumstances are very unpredictable. Our customers are very fearful to make decisions. And I guess that's what I'm struggling with. One, how do we stay relevant? How do we communicate to our clients, but also how do we keep our people happy and motivated in these type of circumstances?
Why do sustainable hangers matter?
Well, the retail industry is a very polluting industry, and we all know that throwaway bags, one-time use plastics, we want to get rid of that, and that's what we're addressing with our hangers. And you indeed spoke about the relevance. Go back to the question: what is really relevant of what you do? And so I truly believe that we actually fit in this time, but obviously right now it's at a sort of standstill.
Yeah, so I mean, the reality is that the purpose remains, but the content of the container remains true, but the container is changing right before your eyes. And all of the reasons that made the company relevant in the first place remain relevant. But how you manifest has to change. And that is part of the finding the new maps. If you're seeking to how to keep the your colleagues connected, they're not going to connect around the container. They're going to connect around the content and about the thing that's most important. And so if you spend time thinking about how do we alter the container for a pandemic or post-pandemic world, there will be a post-pandemic world. And it may be time to go back and start to re-engineer what it is that you were bringing forth in the world.